plot was simple: frame you, distort reality, paint you as the villain in a story you never agreed to play. The architects of deception thought themselves untouchable, convinced that their web of lies was woven too tightly to unravel. They believed perception was reality, that the masses would swallow the script without question, that you would break under the weight of falsehoods crafted with precision. But in their arrogance, they forgot the oldest rule of deception. The trap you set for another will one day become your own coffin. And now? Now, they sit tangled in their own creation, suffocating under the very lies they spun to destroy you. The weak always rely on manipulation, on illusions, on the fragile power of false narratives. They do not dominate through action, through merit, through raw force. They scheme, they construct facades, engineer betrayals, plant seeds of doubt, all to manufacture a reality where they hold control. But deception is not a fortress. It is a house of cards, one gust away from collapse. And the more elaborate the lie, the more unstable the foundation. The moment scrutiny is applied, the moment the first contradiction emerges, the entire structure begins to rot from within. Psychologically, the liar is always at war with reality. They must spend every moment reinforcing the illusion, policing the narrative, ensuring that no cracks appear in the mask they have built. It is a constant battle, an exhausting existence, because truth requires no maintenance. But a lie is a hungry beast that must always be fed. And once the energy to sustain it runs out, once the weight of deception exceeds the strength of the manipulator, collapse is inevitable. You were never meant to win. The entire strategy hinged on your silence, on your submission, on your belief that the world would never believe your side of the story. The manipulators understood one thing: the first to tell the tale controls the perception. And perception, in the hands of the ignorant, often outweighs truth. But what they did not anticipate, what their arrogance blinded them to, was that truth is a force of nature. It does not beg to be believed. It does not crumble under pressure. It does not vanish when buried. It waits. And while they were busy fabricating their masterpiece of deception, you did something they never expected. You did nothing at all. You let them talk. You let them run wild with their lies. Let them weave their intricate trap. Let them build the walls of your supposed downfall. And all the while, you remained still, watching, waiting, understanding the inevitable. Because the mind that deceives is also the mind that overreaches. And given enough time, every liar will entangle themselves in their own contradictions. This is how the strong handle betrayal, not with panic, not with frantic defense, but with absolute patience. You did not need to prove your innocence. They needed to prove your guilt. And in doing so, in their desperate attempts to craft a narrative airtight enough to destroy you, they exposed themselves. Every falsehood required more falsehoods to sustain it. Every whisper became a roar of inconsistencies. Every carefully placed accusation became evidence against them, rather than against you. And by the time they realized their mistake, by the time they saw the holes in their own story, it was too late. Modern society thrives on deception, on quick judgments, on the manipulation of perception. People rarely seek truth. They seek entertainment, a spectacle to believe in. And so, the manipulators play their part, knowing that most will not question, will not dig deeper, will not pause long enough to recognize the cracks in the illusion. But reality is merciless. And reality always wins. The ones who craft falsehoods will eventually forget which lies they have told. And contradiction is a death sentence in a world where attention spans may be short, but receipts last forever. What happens to those who get caught in their own trap? They suffocate under the weight of their own performance. The same voices that once praised them begin to doubt. The same allies that stood beside them start to distance themselves from the stench of exposure. The manipulator, once untouchable, now drowns in the very poison they intended for you. And there is nothing sweeter, nothing more satisfying than watching someone who tried to bury you dig their own grave instead. A lie is only dangerous when it remains unchecked. Left unchallenged, it spreads like a virus, infecting minds, reshaping narratives, embedding itself into reality until even you begin to question what is real. Lies are not powerful on their own. They require belief. They require silence. They require you to stand there, knowing the truth, yet refusing to expose the illusion for what it is. And that is how deception wins. Not through force, not through logic, but through uncontested momentum. A lie that no one stops becomes truth in the eyes of the ignorant. The manipulators of the world understand this better than anyone. They do not rely on strength, on skill, on undeniable merit. They rely on perception. The art of deception is not about crafting a flawless story. It is about making it loud enough that no one dares to question it. And once a lie gains traction, once it settles into the minds of those too weak to seek truth, it becomes armor for the deceiver. A barrier between reality and those who wish to unmask it. And if no one rises to challenge it, that armor remains impenetrable. But here is the fatal flaw. The ones who build power on falsehoods always assume the silence will last. They assume no one will challenge them, that no one will dig, that no one will connect the dots, that no one will find the loose thread and pull. They thrive in the assumption that the truth is too buried, too forgotten, too feared to ever be brought into the light. But the moment one person, just one, refuses to play along, the decay begins. In relationships, this dynamic plays out in the most insidious ways. A lie told about you, a narrative twisted to paint you as the villain, a betrayal justified through distorted truths. These things do not just harm your reputation, they rewrite history. The manipulator understands that words shape reality. If repeated often enough, if reinforced with enough conviction, even the most outrageous falsehoods become plausible. And the moment you hesitate, the moment you allow their version of events to go unchallenged, you surrender control of your own story. But lies are fragile. They cannot survive exposure. They require darkness to thrive, ignorance to persist, a lack of scrutiny to remain intact. And the greatest mistake you can make is assuming that truth alone will correct them. Truth is powerful, but only when wielded. Silence does not serve the innocent, it serves the deceiver. It allows the false narrative to harden, to fortify itself, to become unchallenged history. And the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to unravel. Psychologically, humans are wired to believe whatever they hear first, whatever is repeated most often, whatever aligns with their emotions rather than logic. This is how manipulators weaponize falsehoods. They do not aim to prove anything. They aim to instill doubt, to create emotional reactions, to make their version of events easier to believe than the complex, uncomfortable reality. And if you do not stop that process, If you do not step forward, if you do not rip the mask off before it solidifies, you are complicit in your own erasure. This is why you must always check the lie, challenge it, dismantle it. Do not wait for someone else to step in. Do not assume truth will prevail on its own. Truth is not self-sufficient. It must be fought for, defended, protected from those who wish to distort it. And the moment you allow even one deception to go unanswered, you are giving it permission to grow. And once a lie gains enough strength, it does not just threaten you, it defines you. The weak allow deception to persist because they fear conflict. They believe silence is the path of least resistance, that ignoring falsehoods will make them disappear. But silence is not neutrality. It is surrender. A lie, unchallenged, becomes permanent record. And by the time you decide to stand, by the time you gather the will to correct the story, it will be too late. Perception will have calcified. The damage will be done. And no matter how loudly you scream the truth, no one will care anymore. The solution is ruthless. Do not wait. Do not hesitate. Do not assume the battle is unnecessary. Confront the lie before it becomes legend. If you are slandered, strike back immediately. If your character is attacked, expose the motive behind it. If someone rewrites the truth to serve their own agenda, tear apart the foundation before it has time to settle. This is not about aggression. It is about survival. The world does not correct itself. You must correct it yourself. Deception is a temporary weapon. It cuts deep, but only for a moment. It blinds the weak, manipulates the unaware, and grants short-lived victories to those who wield it. But deception has one fatal flaw. It cannot sustain itself forever. Unlike truth, which stands unshaken under scrutiny, deception rots from within. The longer it lingers, the heavier it becomes, weighing down the one who created it until it collapses under its own contradictions. And when that moment arrives, when the mask cracks, when the illusion fades, when the world sees what was hidden, the deceiver is left exposed, powerless, drowning in the very lies that once served as armor. Every manipulator believes their deception is unbreakable, that the truth can be bent, rewritten, erased if told with enough confidence, that the right words, the right distractions, the right distortions can shape reality itself. And for a time, they succeed because deception thrives in immediacy. It creates instant advantage, quick control, fast power. But deception is not a foundation. It is a disguise. And disguises, no matter how carefully crafted, always slip with time. The greatest mistake you can make in relationships is to underestimate how deception operates. A partner who lies, who distorts, who twists narratives to control perception does not think long-term. They think about the moment. The power gained through deception is like a stolen crown. It shines, it fools the crowd, but it does not belong to them. And eventually, the real king returns, and the fraud is exposed. If you have ever been deceived in a relationship, remember this: the liar's victory is only temporary. The truth will return, and when it does, they will have nothing left to hide behind. Psychologically, deception is a high-risk strategy. It demands constant reinforcement, endless effort, relentless maintenance. The mind of the liar is not at peace. It is always calculating, always correcting, always preparing for the day the illusion is questioned. And this is where the real battle begins, because a deceiver's worst enemy is time. The longer the lie exists, the more cracks form. And the moment those cracks become visible, the entire structure collapses in an instant. This is why the strong never rely on deception, because truth, once established, requires no upkeep. It does not need revision, does not need to be repainted, does not shift under pressure. A person who operates in truth walks freely, never looking over their shoulder, never scrambling to defend their past statements, never afraid of exposure. The one who deceives, however, they are never free. They are chained to their own fabrication, constantly running, always one step away from being unmasked. In relationships, deception is a ticking bomb. A person who builds intimacy on lies, on manipulation, on carefully constructed illusions may feel invincible in the beginning. But intimacy is unsustainable when built on falsehoods. Love does not survive without trust. Respect does not endure without honesty. And the moment deception is exposed, the entire relationship crumbles, because it was never real to begin with. And what is more pathetic than someone who thought they held power, only to be left with nothing when the truth finally emerged? The world remembers truth tellers. The deceivers, they are erased. History has never been kind to the manipulative, to the liars who built empires on falsehoods, to the ones who thought deception was an unbreakable weapon. The frauds who rose to power with lies have all fallen in disgrace. Their names are not remembered with honor. They are spoken with scorn, or not spoken at all. Because deception does not build legacies, it destroys them. When someone tries to deceive you, understand that they are fighting a losing battle. They may have control for a moment, for a day, for a year. But the longer they rely on deception, the greater their downfall will be. Truth is patient. Truth waits. And when it finally emerges, the deceiver will not only lose everything they gained, they will also lose whatever dignity they thought they had left. Because there is no glory in being exposed. There is only shame, humiliation, and irreversible defeat. So if you have ever been lied to, manipulated, framed, be patient. Do not rush to destroy the deceiver. Let time do what it does best. Let them keep lying. Keep building their house of cards. Keep believing in the illusion they have created. Because the greatest justice is not revenge. It is watching them crumble under the weight of their own deception. And once that moment arrives, once the collapse is undeniable, you will not have to lift a single finger. Truth will handle them for you. The human brain is wired to detect inconsistencies. It does not matter how elaborate a deception is, how carefully crafted the illusion appears. The mind is designed to notice the cracks. Even when logic is bypassed, even when emotions cloud judgment, the subconscious is always hunting for discrepancies, always comparing what was said yesterday to what is said today, always analyzing the gaps between words and actions. And this is why deception, no matter how powerful in the short term, always carries an expiration date. Because the more complex a lie becomes, the harder it is to maintain, and the moment a contradiction emerges, the entire illusion begins to crumble. The liar underestimates the intelligence of the human mind. They assume that once a falsehood is accepted, it remains unchallenged. But deception is not static. It must be constantly reinforced, constantly defended, constantly revised to adapt to new situations. And that is where the failure begins. Because the more a lie spreads, the more details must be accounted for. One false statement requires another, then another, until the story becomes too intricate to keep straight. And when the liar begins contradicting themselves, that is when the collapse becomes inevitable. In relationships, this pattern is always present. A partner who lies, who manipulates, who distorts reality for control, will eventually contradict themselves. A story told once must be told again exactly the same, with every minor detail intact. But memory is not perfect. And the moment a deviation occurs, the moment something doesn't align, your mind will register the inconsistency. At first, it will be subtle, a feeling, a whisper of doubt. But the human brain does not ignore anomalies. It fixates on them, replays them, analyzes them until the deception begins to unravel on its own. This is why manipulators despise scrutiny. They do not fear the truth directly. They fear slipping up. They fear the moment when their own words become their downfall, when they can no longer keep track of what was said, what was implied, what details were left ambiguous. They rely on your lack of attention. They assume you will not notice the small inconsistencies, but you do. And once those cracks are visible, once your mind locks onto the inconsistencies, the entire structure of the lie begins to shake. Psychologically, deception is exhausting. A person who lies must always be alert, always on guard, always aware of how the falsehood must be adjusted to maintain its credibility. Truth requires no such effort. It does not shift, does not require maintenance, does not need to be remembered. A person who speaks the truth is at ease, because reality does not need a script. But a liar is always rehearsing, always watching their own words, always living in fear of exposure. And that pressure, it eventually breaks them. The longer deception lasts, the more it mutates. What begins as a simple distortion becomes an elaborate network of interwoven falsehoods, each dependent on the other, each requiring constant reinforcement. And as the complexity increases, so does the likelihood of failure. The liar must now account for every word ever spoken, every scenario ever fabricated, every false emotion ever displayed. And that is unsustainable. You have seen this in life, in friendships, in relationships. A person who lies once must keep lying to survive. And the deeper they go, the more trapped they become in their own construction. The paranoia sets in. They start correcting details that no one even questioned. They over-explain. They stumble over their own words, desperately trying to hold the mask in place. But the cracks widen. The mind of the deceiver begins to malfunction, burdened by the sheer weight of the illusion. And soon, it is not you who has to expose them. They expose themselves. The strongest strategy against deception is not aggression, not confrontation, but patience. You do not need to tear down the lie. You only need to observe, because the liar will eventually contradict themselves. They will make mistakes. And when that moment comes, you will not need to argue. You will simply watch as the false reality they built comes crashing down upon them. The same weapon they wielded against you becomes the noose around their own neck. This is why deception is never a long-term victory. It burns fast, burns bright, but it always self-destructs. And the one who built their existence on falsehoods will be left with nothing but the wreckage of their own failed manipulation. Meanwhile, the one who never needed to lie, the one who operated in truth, in patience, in certainty, that is the one who remains standing when the dust settles. Every deceiver underestimates time. They believe that if a lie survives the moment, it will survive forever. But time is merciless. It does not protect illusions, does not shield deception, does not preserve the falsehoods that were once spoken with such confidence. Time exposes everything. A liar may convince the world for a day, for a month, even for years. But truth is patient. It waits, observing, calculating, allowing the deception to unravel under its own contradictions. And when the moment comes, when the first inconsistency is noticed, when the first doubt is whispered, the collapse is no longer a matter of if, but when. This is why the ones who operate in truth have nothing to fear. They do not have to recall their words, do not have to adjust their stories, do not have to wake up every morning wondering if today is the day the illusion breaks apart. The deceiver, however, lives in constant paranoia. The weight of their own falsehoods bears down on them, a slow suffocation of their own making. They must account for every detail, every fabrication, every manipulated event, until their mind betrays them, until exhaustion forces a mistake, until the walls they built to trap others become their own prison. And that is when they fall. Not because someone exposed them with force, but because the weight of their own deception became too heavy to carry.